On a rainy afternoon in a quiet American town, a single dad pulled over to help a woman stranded by the roadside, not knowing she was a hero in hiding. She wore no uniform, carried no pride, and had nothing but her son. And secrets she thought no one would ever uncover. But when a knock came days later, everything he thought he knew about her unraveled, revealing a past that could either break them both or bring them home. If stories of unexpected kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles speak to your heart, you're in the right place. Subscribe now to join us on this unforgettable journey, because sometimes the most powerful stories begin with a knock in the rain. The rain came fast, hard, and without mercy, like it had waited all day, just to collapse on the small town of Willow Ridge. It pounded the roof of Owen Taylor's old Ford pickup like an angry drummer, filling the cabin with a low, restless roar. He sat parked near the edge of the county highway, hands clenched on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the asphalt that was fast becoming a river. It had been 3 years since he'd last driven in the rain at night. 3 years since the worst night of his life, a night that stole more than just his wife. It had taken his faith in timing and second chances, and in whatever God may or may not have been watching. Tonight he didn't plan on staying out long, just a quick supply run. Charlie, his 8-year-old son, had developed a cough. Nothing serious yet, but Owen didn't take chances anymore. He'd learned the hard way what waiting too long looked like. Then he saw her. A figure emerged from the wall of rain up ahead, small, steady, and carrying something in her arms. She walked on the shoulder of the highway with the kind of determination that didn't belong in this weather. Her coat was reflective fire department style, and her boots sloshed through water like she didn't feel it. A child was curled against her chest, wrapped tight in a soaking blanket. She wasn't hitchhiking. She wasn't waving. She was surviving. Owen's grip on the wheel tightened. Don't stop. Keep driving. You have a kid at home. But something, maybe it was the storm, maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the echo of his late wife's voice, froze him. He rolled down his window halfway. Cold wind and water sprayed inside, but he didn't care. You need help, he called out over the downpour. The woman turned, hesitant. Her face was wet, not from tears, at least not yet, but from the rain that had soaked her to the bone. Her voice was strong despite the fatigue. My son has a fever, she said. We've been walking since Cedar Cross. I didn't mean to bother anyone. I didn't know where else to go. Owen's heart dropped. Cedar Cross was 9 miles back. Without thinking, he reached over and opened the passenger door. Get in. She paused, eyes flicking toward the boy in her arms. He stirred, coughed, and whimpered in his sleep. That settled it. She climbed in. The cabin filled instantly with the scent of wet wool, cold air, and something else, something metallic and faintly smoky. Not unpleasant, just familiar, like the smell of a campfire long gone out. I'm Owen, he said as he pulled back onto the road. That's it. Just Owen. She glanced at him, then back out the window. Lena. Just Lena. She didn't answer. They drove in silence, save for the rattle of the rain and the low hum of the truck's heater struggling to warm them. Owen stole a few glances at her. She held the child tightly, her eyes always scanning the darkness beyond the windshield. Not scared. Alert. Trained. He'd seen that look once on a firefighter pulling a woman from a flooded basement during the last big storm. You were with a department, he finally asked. I was, she said quietly. Not anymore. Owen nodded, respecting the weight in her voice. He knew that tone. It meant don't ask me yet. Maybe don't ask me ever. When they reached his house, a modest single story with chipped paint and a sagging porch, Lena hesitated again. Her eyes lingered on the mailbox on the windows, like checking for signs of who he really was. I have a son, he said simply. He's home with a cough. You and your boy can stay in the guest room tonight. It's not much, but it's warm." Lena's eyes softened just a fraction. "Thank you." Inside, Charlie blinked up at them from the couch wrapped in a blanket and clutching a stuffed bear. His eyes met Lena's, then her son's. His expression didn't change, but Owen saw it, that flicker of curiosity, of quiet observation that always came before his questions. Charlie Owen said, kneeling beside him, "This is Miss Lena. She and her son are staying with us tonight." Charlie said nothing, just nodded once, solemnly, and scooted to make room. Later, after Lena settled her son into the guest room, never letting go of the boy until he was deep asleep, she stepped into the kitchen, where Owen was making tea. "I'll leave in the morning," she said, not asking, just stating. "We won't be any trouble." He looked up at her, rainwater still beating at the ends of her hair. "You walked 9 miles in a storm, Lena. You don't have to walk back out into it." She didn't respond, just stared at the steam rising from the kettle. "I don't usually open my door to strangers," he continued, almost more to himself than to her. "But you didn't feel like one." She looked at him, really looked for the first time. And for a brief moment something cracked, something small but unmistakable in her posture. Gratitude. Fatigue. Maybe even trust. "Neither did you," she whispered. The kettle whistled. Morning. In Willow Ridge arrived gray and quiet, as if the storm from the night before had wrung the sky dry. The rain had stopped, but its scent lingered on the porch wood and clung to the windows like memory. Owen stood by the kitchen sink, staring out into the yard, where his dogwood tree bent gently in the wind. Steam rose from the mug in his hands, but he hadn't taken a sip. Behind him, quiet footsteps. Not Charlie. Lighter. He turned. Lena stood in the doorway, wearing the same fire-resistant raincoat from the night before, though she had pushed the hood back. Her hair, still damp, clung to her shoulders in soft waves. There were tired lines beneath her eyes, but her posture remained upright, composed. "I hope the room was okay," Owen said. She nodded. Better than the back seat of a Greyhound in a gas station bathroom. There was something in her tone, dry, almost deadpan, that made him glance up. "I wasn't being poetic," she added. "I didn't think you were." A pause settled between them, filled only by the low murmur of the heater kicking on. She folded her arms, but not out of cold. Defense. "You don't have to keep us here," she said, her voice more even now. "We won't be your problem long." "You're not a problem. You don't know that." "I know you walked 9 miles with a sick child through a storm without asking anyone for a damn thing," he said quietly. "That tells me enough." Lena's eyes flicked away toward the hallway where her son was still sleeping. "What's his name?" Owen asked. She hesitated. "Then Emmett." "That's a good name." She gave a small nod as if that was all she could afford. Charlie wandered in a few minutes later, rubbing sleep from his eyes and holding the same stuffed bear he'd had since toddlerhood. His cough sounded a little better, though Owen made a mental note to give him another dose of syrup. Lena watched Charlie closely but didn't speak. Charlie did what Charlie always did when someone new was around. He observed, silent and steady, as if deciding whether or not you could be trusted. "Would you like some toast, buddy?" Owen asked. Charlie nodded, then turned to Lena. "Is your boy sick?" Lena looked at Owen briefly, then down at Charlie. "He's been running a fever, but he's strong." Charlie blinked. "My mom used to say that when I got sick. Before she—" He trailed off, but Lena didn't flinch or force a change of subject. She knelt down, her eye level even with his. "She sounds like she loved you very much," she said. Charlie gave the barest of nods, then sat down at the table beside her. Later after breakfast, Owen was out front repairing the screen door, while Lena stood on the porch, sipping coffee from the mug he'd handed her without asking. She wore her coat like armor even now, as the sun began to press through the thinning clouds. "You fix things," she said. Owen looked up from his crouch. "Sometimes. This old house has a way of falling apart just enough to keep me humble." She managed a ghost of a smile. "I used to fix things too. Not doors. People. Fires. Chaos. You were good at it." She didn't answer right away. "I was," she said, "until I wasn't." Owen didn't push. The way she said it wasn't bitter, just final. Like a line had been drawn in the sand, and she'd chosen not to step back over it. "Why'd you stop?" he asked gently. She looked away, her fingers tightening around the mug. Because someone had to live for Emmett. That stopped him. He let her words settle, let the wind carry the weight of them. He didn't need her to explain. He recognized the choice. He'd made it too. Inside, Charlie had shown Emmett how to use the small chalkboard wall in the hallway. By mid-morning, the two boys had drawn a crooked fire truck, a dog wearing a cape, and a house labeled "Our Home" in shaky capital letters. Lena stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching her son smile for the first time in days. "Thank you," she said softly to Owen, who had come up behind her. "For what?" "For giving him a moment to feel normal." "You gave him more than a moment," Owen said. "You got him through last night. You're giving him his mother. That's everything." Lena looked at him, her expression unreadable but not cold. Then she spoke, low careful. "I'm not always going to be safe to be around." Owen frowned. "What do you mean?" She took a step away almost instinctively. "There are people, situations. I've been part of things I can't just walk away from. And yet here you are," he said. "Walking away." "Running," she corrected. "I was running. Now you're standing still." A beat passed. "That's dangerous too," she murmured. That evening, Owen sat on the porch with Lena as the boys played with toy trucks in the front room. Lena held a photo in her hand, creased at the corners, water damaged, but still clear. A man in uniform. A younger version of Lena beside him. They were smiling, holding a newborn between them. "My husband," she said. "His name was Caleb. We met at the academy." Owen remained silent. "He died 2 years ago, on duty." "I wasn't there." Her voice caught, but she didn't look away from the photo. "I should have been." "You don't know that," Owen said. "I do." She paused. "Because I was undercover, embedded in an arson investigation. No one knew, not even him. If I'd been at his station that night." Her voice trailed off, but Owen saw it behind her eyes. The weight, the guilt, the story no one had been allowed to hear. "Lena," he said quietly, "you were doing your job. I was doing my duty," she corrected. "I just don't know which one cost me more." In the silence that followed, Lena folded the photo carefully and slipped it back into her coat pocket. Then she looked at him. Really looked. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just needed to stop running for one night." Owen leaned back, his gaze fixed on the darkening sky. "Well," he said, "lucky for you. This porch holds still pretty well." The next morning dawned slow and golden, as if the sun itself had been waiting to see if Lena and her son would still be there. Light filtered through the lace curtains in the kitchen, casting soft patterns on the worn tile floor. The rain had washed the air clean. The world outside was soaked but shining. Owen moved quietly, frying bacon, with the ease of a man who had long ago memorized the rhythm of solitary mornings. Charlie sat at the table with a comic book open in front of him, absently tracing the edge of the page while sniffing the air. "Smells like a Saturday," he murmured. "It's Tuesday, pal," Owen said with a chuckle, flipping a pancake onto a plate. Charlie shrugged. "Smells like a good Tuesday, then." Footsteps sounded in the hallway, tentative, soft. Owen turned just as Lena stepped into the kitchen, her son Emmett trailing close behind his small hand, wrapped in the hem of her oversized sweatshirt. Lena's hair was brushed back, damp at the ends. Her face was still pale, but her eyes looked less guarded, as if the storm outside and inside had both begun to pass. "I hope it's okay," she said, voice still low. "We woke early. Emmett was hungry." Owen nodded toward the table. "You're just in time for pancakes. Charlie says they cure most things." Charlie looked up and gave Emmett a shy smile. "Especially when you put peanut butter on them." "Peanut butter on pancakes," Emmett whispered, like it was a secret too good to be true. Lena hesitated only a moment before leading her son to the chair across from Charlie. She looked at Owen as she sat. "You don't have to keep doing this." "And yet, here we are," he said, pouring more batter into the skillet. As they ate, the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and warmth, things Owen hadn't realized he missed. Emmett, though quiet, ate with wide eyes and a wiped clean plate. Lena only picked at her food, more focused on watching him eat than feeding herself. Owen caught her glance once or twice, but she said nothing. After breakfast, as Charlie took Emmett outside to show him the tire swing, Owen motioned Lena toward the small utility room beside the kitchen. "I've got a heater in there," he said, "if you want to dry his coat." She followed, careful and quiet. The room was small and cluttered, half laundry, half workshop. A pegboard hung with old tools, most a little rusty. A broken flashlight sat in pieces on the counter, surrounded by screws and a half-taken-apart socket wrench. "Didn't think people still fixed things themselves," she said, a small smile in her voice. "Old habits. This place eats money. I learned early on that it's cheaper to figure things out." She ran her fingers across the pegboard. "You label your tools." "I do." "You alphabetized your screws." He raised a brow. "I didn't say I wasn't a little compulsive." Lena smiled an actual smile, faint but real. "I used to be like that," she said. "Organized, controlled. Every bolt, every second accounted for." "Used to be." She didn't answer, but she looked at the socket wrench like it was something she hadn't touched in years. Later, Owen heard the clink of metal from the workshop and leaned in to find Lena sitting on a stool, the broken flashlight in her lap. She had disassembled it entirely and was now soldering a loose connection with quiet concentration. "You're good at that," he said. "Used to be part of my job," she murmured. "Rebuilding gear after a fire. Rewiring radios, fixing breathing tanks. I was always the one people came to with the busted stuff." She paused, adjusted a spring, then added, "Then one day I broke too, and nobody asked me to fix anything anymore." Owen leaned against the doorframe. "You're still fixing things, Lena. Might just look a little different now." She looked up. "You don't know what I've done." "No," he said simply. "But I know what you're doing now. That counts for something." She looked at him for a long moment, and he held her gaze without flinching. Then quietly, she clicked the flashlight back together. It lit up. He clapped once low and teasing, once low. The pancake fairy and flashlight savior. A smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "Don't ruin it." That night, after Emmett had fallen asleep in the guest room, Lena stepped out onto the porch. Owen was already there, mug in hand, wrapped in a faded flannel. The porch light glowed warm above them. She didn't sit right away, just leaned against the railing, arms, crossed eyes on the horizon. "It's funny," she said. "You can do everything right. Train, prepare, show up on time, save everyone else's life, and still lose your own." Owen didn't respond. He knew what she meant. "I was undercover for 8 months," she continued, "pretending to be a gear tech for a private security outfit that was torching buildings for insurance. I had evidence. I was going to bring them down. But I missed one call. One fire too many. It was my husband's station, and I wasn't there." Owen's throat tightened. "You blamed yourself." "I still do." Silence settled between them again, this time heavier. "You know what I think," Owen said finally. "I think surviving when others don't, it's not a punishment. It's a responsibility. You carry the story. You carry the truth. And what if the truth hurts more than the lie ever did? Then it's even more important to tell it." They sat in silence as night crept in the air, cool but not cold. Finally, Lena whispered, "I don't know how to be around people anymore, especially people who haven't seen what I've seen." Owen looked at her, his voice steady. "You don't have to know. You just have to stay." Lena hadn't meant to stay more than one night. She'd told herself that when she first stepped into Owen's truck, under the weight of the rain. Told herself again as she watched Emmett sleep peacefully in a warm bed. Repeated it the next morning when Owen handed her coffee, like they'd been doing this routine for years. But by the fourth day, she was still there. And strangely, the world hadn't ended. That morning, she stood at the small mirror in the guest room, brushing Emmett's hair with practiced fingers. He squirmed and yawned, still sticky-eyed from sleep. "Do we have to leave today?" he asked. She froze. His voice had been soft, casual, but it landed like an anchor in her chest. "You said we wouldn't stay too long," he added. "I did," Lena replied, eyes on his reflection. "And I meant it. But I like it here." His fingers twisted in the hem of his pajama shirt. "Charlie let me use his crayons. That's kind of him." And Owen fixed the swing in the tree. "He said I could help paint the barn door next week." Lena's hand paused in his hair. A long silence passed. Then gently she said, "Sometimes liking something doesn't mean we get to keep it, Em." He looked up at her in the mirror. "But why not? Because people from your mother's past don't get to belong anywhere. Because when you carry the kind of secrets I do, you don't settle down. You don't get porches and pancakes and little boys laughing in tree swings. Instead," she said, "we just don't, sweetheart. Not always." Emmett didn't press. He rarely did. But that morning, as she helped him down the hallway, she caught something in his eyes she hadn't seen in months. Hope. In the kitchen, Owen was fixing a leaking faucet with his usual quiet focus. Charlie sat at the table with a math worksheet and a mug of apple juice, both of which he seemed to be ignoring in favor of watching Emmett stack blueberries into a tower on his plate. "You two going into town today?" Owen asked without looking up. Lena poured herself coffee. "Thinking about it. Need to get some supplies. You can take my truck. She's old, but dependable." She raised a brow. "That's generous." He shrugged. "You've earned it." She hesitated, then crossed her arms loosely. Why Owen glanced at her, then really looked. "Because you're still here, and because it's been a long time since this house felt like something more than walls and silence." His words caught her off guard, not because they were grand or dramatic, but because they were honest, earnest. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her without suspicion agenda or uniformed formality. "Besides," he added with a smirk, "Charlie says your pancakes are better than mine." I'm not sure I believe him, but I respect the courage. Lena laughed, an involuntary, caught-off-guard sound that made Owen look up again, surprised. She pressed a hand to her lips, as if to push the laugh back inside, but it was too late. "You really want me to borrow your truck?" she asked. "I trust you." 3 words. 3 simple words that made her breath catch. That afternoon, after the boys had gone to play in the backyard, Lena stepped into the utility room and stared at herself in the mirror, mounted above Owen's workbench. The woman who looked back at her was lean, sharp-edged, and tired, but not broken. Not yet. She opened her duffel bag and pulled out a sealed envelope, water-damaged but intact. Her name was scrawled across the front in her husband's handwriting. She hadn't read it. Not in 2 years. It had been found in his locker after the fire, given to her by his captain the day of the funeral. but something in her heart hadn't let her open it. Like reading his last words would solidify the finality of it all. Now, standing in a stranger's house that didn't feel so strange anymore, she sat down and carefully opened the seal. Lena, if you're reading this, then something's happened. I wish I could tell you I knew it was coming. Maybe I did. Maybe we both did in some way. I know you. I know how you take the weight of the world and carry it like armor. But you don't have to. Not always. Not alone. If you were undercover when this happened, don't carry guilt for my death. I made peace with the risk when I married you. You don't get to shoulder both our sins. Promise me something. Live. For Emmett. For yourself. Don't disappear into the ashes. Find the one thing that makes you feel real again, and hold on to it. You are still light, Lena. You are still fire. All my love, Caleb. She cried. Silently, quietly, the way someone cries when grief has been held off for too long and finally finds a crack to slip through. She buried her face in her hands and wept for what had been, for what could have been, and for the fact that maybe it wasn't too late for something new. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, Owen found her on the porch, arms crossed, letter folded in her lap. He didn't ask. Instead, he sat beside her and handed her a steaming mug of tea. I read something today, she said. Owen waited. It told me I don't have to disappear into the ashes. He looked at her thoughtful. Sounds like someone who knew you well. He did. A moment passed. Then she added, You're the first person I've let see me in years. I thought if anyone looked too close, they'd see the damage. I see it, Owen said softly. But I also see someone who walked through hell and still came out holding her child. That's not damage. That's strength. She looked at him, then really looked. In his face, she didn't see pity. She saw understanding, maybe even grace. That night, for the first time in months, Lena fell asleep without the echo of sirens in her head. It was sometime after midnight when the storm returned this time, not in the sky, but inside the walls of Owen Taylor's quiet home. Charlie was the one who heard it first, a dull clunk. Then the soft metallic rasp of hinges. At first he thought it was the wind, but the sound was too careful, too intentional. He tiptoed down the hallway, socked feet, silent on old hardwood, until he reached the guest room. The door was cracked open just enough for him to see Emmett asleep in the bed. But Lena wasn't there. The next sound came from the utility room. Curious and more brave than cautious, Charlie moved toward it. He peeked around the corner and froze. The duffel bag. Open. His dad's old toolbox. Unlocked. And Lena, kneeling her back, turned, pulling something from beneath the floorboard panel Owen had always kept, nailed shut. The one Charlie wasn't allowed to touch. He took one step inside. The floor creaked. Lena turned fast. Too fast for someone just looking for a charger, which is exactly what she said. Charlie stared at the thing in her hand. A folder. Sealed. Yellowed with age. "What's that?" he asked. She didn't speak, just looked at him, a strange kind of panic behind her eyes, one she masked quickly. "I needed..." something she murmured, slipping the folder back into her bag. "It's nothing." Charlie frowned. Why was it hidden under the floor? The next morning, Owen was already in the kitchen when Charlie came in, unusually quiet. He poured himself juice, stared at his toast, like it might offer him answers. Owen, sensing something, lowered the paper. "Out with it." Charlie looked up. "Why do we keep stuff under the floor?" Owen froze. "What kind of stuff?" "Like folders, with locks, secret papers?" Owen blinked, then stood slowly. "What did you see? I think she took something." Owen's stomach turned. He didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to think that after all the nights on the porch, the honest silences, the mornings that felt like beginnings, Lena might still be running, still hiding, still stealing. When he found her, she was in the backyard helping Emmett build a birdhouse out of scrap wood. Her hands were steady, her eyes calm. If there was guilt, it wasn't in her face. Owen waited until Emmett went inside before he said anything. "You went through my tools last night." Lena didn't flinch. "Yes." "You opened the floor panel." Another nod. "Why?" She held his gaze. "Because I needed to know if you had a past as buried as mine." Owen stared. "So you thought what?" "That I had a criminal record tucked beneath a wrench." I thought she said carefully that if you were hiding something, maybe I wasn't the only one. He stepped back, the hurt blooming sharp in his chest. "And if I had been, would that have made me safer? Or just more like you?" Lena looked away. "You don't trust people, I get," that Owen continued. "You've lived a life that taught you not to. But I let you in. I let your son sleep under my roof. I made space. And you tore up my floor." The silence was brutal. "I'm not a thief," she said, voice tight. "I just needed to feel in control." "Then you've succeeded," he said coldly. "Because now you're in control of whether you stay or go." That night, Lena packed in silence. Emmett didn't ask why. He knew that tone in her breath, the tension in her shoulders. He'd seen it before. Charlie didn't come out of his room, not even when Owen knocked quietly twice. And Owen, he stood by the window long after she left, watching the tail lights disappear into the dusk. The porch light buzzed overhead. The dogwood tree swayed. But the house, once filled with cautious warmth, felt colder than it had in months. 3 days passed. No calls, no notes, just absence. The mornings went back to being quiet. Charlie didn't ask about Emmett. Owen didn't ask about Lena. They tiptoed around the subject like it was a sleeping animal no one wanted to wake. But on the 4th morning, Owen found something he hadn't noticed before. Behind the flashlight Lena had repaired sat a small, square envelope. His name was written in clean, deliberate script. He opened it. "Owen, I never meant to stay. But your home gave me something I thought I'd lost, stillness. That scared me more than any fire ever did. I panicked. I ruined something before it had a chance to become real. That's what I do. I didn't steal anything. I only looked. I wanted to know if someone else out there knew what it meant to hide in plain sight. I found nothing. And that scared me too. Because you're good. Solid. And I don't know how to belong to something that doesn't feel broken. Tell Charlie I'm sorry. If we don't meet again, thank you for seeing me not as a problem, but as a person." Lena Owen read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it, tucked it into his coat pocket, and walked out onto the porch. The wind had shifted. It smelled like rain again. And this time, he hoped it would come. The knock came on a Friday morning, quiet, deliberate, almost apologetic. Owen opened the door, expecting the mailman, or maybe the neighbor needing help with a fence post. What he wasn't expecting was a man in a dark gray jacket, tall, neatly kept, holding a worn leather portfolio and standing with the stillness of someone used to long silences. "You Owen Taylor?" the man asked. "I am." The man offered a firm but gentle nod. "Name's Marshall Clay. I'm with the U.S. Fire Service. Retired. Volunteer liaison these days." He held up a badge and an old ID photo that looked like it belonged to another lifetime. "I'm not here on official business. Just something personal." Owen blinked, cautious. "What's this about?" Lena Monroe Clay said. She ever mentioned me, Owen's stomach tightened. Not by name. "That's fair. I wasn't always someone worth mentioning." Owen didn't respond, but his body language held still the way you listen, when you know the next words might change something. Clay glanced over his shoulder toward the distant horizon. I'm her father-in-law, Caleb's dad. Owen's fingers curled slightly around the doorframe. The name struck like the first crack of thunder. May I come in? Clay asked. It's not official, but it's important. Owen hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat in the living room. Charlie was at school. Emmett nowhere in sight, and the absence of both felt suddenly loud. Clay held the leather folder loosely in his lap, running his fingers along the edges, the way some men held photographs of ghosts. I didn't know Lena well, Clay said after a moment. But I knew the version of her Caleb loved. He talked about her like most men talk about legends. Fierce, loyal, tougher than the rest of them put together. Owen nodded slowly. That sounds like her. She never came to the funeral. Didn't speak to the press. The department covered for her at the time said she was on assignment. But I knew something wasn't right. A man dies in a blaze, and his wife doesn't even claim the casket. He swallowed hard. That tells you something. Owen leaned forward slightly. She was undercover, working a case that exposed the very fire Caleb died in. She couldn't break cover. Clay exhaled long quiet, like he'd been holding that breath for years. I know, he said. I didn't then. But I do now. He opened the folder. Inside was a letter yellowed at the corners addressed in Caleb's handwriting, and below it a picture, Caleb and Lena, arms around each other, the infant Emmett swaddled in Caleb's gear jacket. She never got to read this one, Clay said. It wasn't in his locker. It was in my attic. I found it 2 weeks ago in a box I couldn't throw away. Owen stared at the letter, but didn't reach for it. She's alive, Owen said quietly. Out there, with Emmett. I think she's trying to disappear again. Clay nodded. That's why I'm here. Later that night after Clay had gone, and the house had quieted, Owen stood on the back porch with the letter in his hand. The stars were dim behind a curtain of clouds. The wind had the scent of coming rain again. All was rain. He unfolded the letter. So if this finds you, then something's gone wrong. Lena may not be able to explain why she disappears, but I need you to understand that she never stopped protecting us. She carried weight I could never name, and I watched her break herself trying to carry it alone. If she runs, find her. Don't scold her. Don't chase her. Just knock on the door, hand her this, and remind her. She's still light. She's still fire. Love, Caleb. Owen folded the letter back into its envelope slower this time. There was a quiet reverence in the way he did it, like it contained something sacred. Then he walked into the house, grabbed his coat, and reached for the envelope Lena had left him, the one with his name on it. He laid them side by side on the kitchen table. 2 letters, 2 truths. The next morning, Owen drove to Cedar Cross. He didn't know exactly where Lena had gone, but there was one place she might return to the fire station Caleb had died protecting. It had been decommissioned after the incident left, boarded up and abandoned near the edge of town. Owen found it exactly as he remembered. Blackened walls, cracked windows, the ghost of sirens long since silenced. But there, parked in the gravel lot, was his truck. Lena was sitting on the front steps, Emmett curled asleep beside her, wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he approached, and the moment their eyes met, there was no need for anger or apology. Just breath. Just gravity. You found me, she said softly. Owen knelt down and handed her the letter. Caleb did, he said. She took it in trembling hands. They sat in silence as she read. Tears came slowly, one by one, sliding down her cheeks without a single sob. When she finished, she held the letter against her heart. I didn't know he left this, she whispered. He wanted you to stop running. I don't know how. Owen looked at her voice, firm but gentle. You come back, 1 hour at a time, one decision at a time. Lena looked away. I hurt you. Yes, Owen said with no bitterness. But I forgave you the moment you left that letter. Why, 'cause you were honest. Because you didn't steal anything. And because I saw your shadow before I saw your face, and I still chose to open the door." She exhaled slowly, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. "I don't want to keep running." "Then don't." Emmett stirred in his sleep, leaning into her. Owen smiled. "Come home." And this time she didn't say no. It rained again that week, not the kind of storm that sent Lena pacing in silence, but a steady, gentle rain that softened the ground and wrapped the hills in fog. It fell like a hymn, quiet and cleansing, as if the sky itself had chosen not to roar this time, but to whisper. "You're safe now." Lena sat on the front porch, with Emmett tucked against her side. Owen was inside with Charlie arguing good-naturedly over how much peanut butter was too much peanut butter for one slice of toast. The house smelled like coffee and flannel. Laughter filtered through the walls. For the first time in a long time, Lena didn't feel like a stranger. She felt tethered. She looked down at her son, his eyelids fluttering with the kind of peace that only came to children when their world had finally stopped moving. His cheek rested against her ribs, and one of his hands clutched the hem of her shirt, still instinctively afraid she might disappear again. She wouldn't. Not this time. Over the next few days, stillness settled over the Taylor household like a soft blanket. Lena and Owen didn't speak about the past unless it asked to be spoken about. They worked side by side, repairing the old barn door. Lena surprisingly handy with power tools. Owen patient in silence. Charlie and Emmett built forts out of firewood, declared themselves forest knights, and returned each afternoon smelling like wet leaves and triumph. One morning, Owen returned from town with 2 gallons of paint, sun-bleached red and dusty cream, and a quiet suggestion. What if he said we made the barn something more than a barn? Lena glanced at the faded structure, then at him. Like what a place for kids. Emergency drills, fire safety, maybe even CPR classes. Lena's brow arched. "You want me to teach again?" Owen shrugged. "You're still fire." She smiled fully this time. "You remembered that line. I remember every word I mean." By the end of the week, the barn was scrubbed clean. Emmett and Charlie insisted on painting the lower half, which meant the entire thing looked like a slightly lopsided flag, but Lena didn't mind. The boys had created something from their own hands, something imperfect and proud. On Friday, Lena pulled out a box from the back of her truck. Inside were her old turnout boots, gloves, a rusted helmet, and the fire department patches she'd kept in a sealed bag all these years. She laid them out in the barn one by one like offerings. "Are you sure?" Owen asked, gently standing beside her. "I think I need to remember who I used to be," she said, "so I can decide who I want to become." She pinned the last patch, ladder 19, on a wooden beam near the doorway. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't let go until it was firmly secured. That evening, the barn glowed with new life lanterns hanging from the rafters, the scent of fresh wood and old memory mingling in the air. The boys chased each other around with makeshift firefighter hats Lena had helped them craft from cardboard and duct tape. Owen poured lemonade into mason jars. Lena handed them out like medals. Later, after the boys had fallen asleep on a pile of blankets in the barn, Lena and Owen sat on the porch again side by side. The rain, a soft curtain in the distance. "I used to think healing came with silence," she said. Time. Distance. Walking away from everything that hurt. And now, I think healing might be loud. Messy. Full of rusty hinges, and too much peanut butter, and tiny hands that make you stay even when you're afraid. She looked at him. "I didn't know I was allowed to be happy again." "You are," Owen said. "And you don't have to earn it. You just have to say yes." A beat passed. "I say yes," she whispered. to what he didn't ask. He didn't have to. The next morning brought more rain, but nobody minded. Charlie and Emmett jumped in puddles while Owen fixed the swing for the third time that week. Lena stood at the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes, while music hummed from the old radio. Her sweatshirt was stained with paint. Her hands still smelled like cedar. She caught herself humming along to the melody, something soft from the 70s, and paused, startled by the sound of her own voice. It had been so long since she'd felt music inside her. Later that afternoon, the barn saw its first official visitor, a teenage girl from down the road who had lost her father to a house fire the year before. She'd heard that the lady firefighter was teaching CPR in an old barn behind the red house. Lena took her hands, showed her how to check a pulse, how to count compressions. The girl listened, nodded, asked quiet questions. Afterward, as the girl left with a folded brochure and a smile that hadn't been there before, Lena leaned against the barn door and exhaled. "I think this matters," she said to Owen, who stood nearby. "It does," he replied. "You do." She met his eyes. "So do you." That night, rain tapped gently on the windows. The porch light glowed gold across the steps. Lena sat on the porch swing with Owen beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly. Neither spoke for a while. Then Lena said, "When Emmett asked why it always rains here, I told him maybe the sky just knows what we need." "And what's that?" "Something soft, something that doesn't demand anything but lets you breathe." Owen nodded slowly, like a second chance. She turned to him. "No, a real chance. Not one you have to earn by being perfect. Just one that lets you be." Owen reached over, took her hand. "Then let's just be." In that house, with the rain gently falling, laughter returning, and fire once again a source of warmth instead of loss, Lena Monroe began to rise. Not as the woman she used to be, not as the one she'd tried so hard to bury, but as someone new. Forged not in fire, but in rain. It happened just after sunset. The rain had paused for once, leaving the air heavy and still, as though the whole world was holding its breath. The barn stood quiet and clean in the fading light tools. Neatly hung the chalkboard, freshly wiped 2 sets of tiny boots resting beside the door like a pair of stories waiting to be continued. Inside the house, Lena was setting the table for dinner, chili bubbling on the stove, cornbread warming in the oven. Owen leaned against the counter, sipping tea, his shirt still damp from fixing a gutter that afternoon. "I still don't know how you make the whole place smell like Sunday," he said. Smiling, Lena shrugged a spoon in one hand. "Basic training. You learn quick in the station house. If you can cook, nobody volunteers you for bathroom duty." Smart woman. Their laughter was easy now, unforced, like rain tapping softly on old glass. In the living room, Charlie and Emmett were building a Lego fire station. Owen had promised them a reward if it had at least 4 walls a roof, and no dragons involved this time. The knock came just as Lena reached for the oven mitts. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. It was deliberate, like whoever stood behind that door had waited a long time to be there. And now that they weren't leaving without an answer. Lena froze. So did Owen. They exchanged a glance, silent, sharp. Owen stepped forward. "Stay with the kids," he said, already moving toward the front door. Lena followed anyway, heart thudding. Not fear. Something else. Something that crawled up from the past and whispered, "This is it. Whatever it is, it's here." Owen opened the door slowly. The man on the other side looked to be in his late 50s, dressed simply faded jeans utility jacket, a cap with a stitched ladder insignia on the front. His face was lined, tired, but not unkind. He held something in his hands, a small wrapped box. "Evening," he said, his voice steady. "I'm looking for Lena Monroe." Owen stood straighter. "Who's asking?" The man didn't flinch. "My name is Joseph Keller. My son was injured in a fire 4 years ago. He was pulled out of the basement by a female firefighter. She stayed with him until the paramedics arrived, even though the building was collapsing around them." He paused. He never got her name. But he remembered her eyes. Lena stepped forward before Owen could reply. "I remember," she said quietly. Joseph turned. Their eyes met and something in his face softened. "I thought you might." They sat in the living room, the boys quietly ushered into the barn with a flashlight and strict instructions not to eat all the marshmallows. Lena sat across from Joseph, her posture guarded, but not hostile. Owen hovered nearby, silent. Joseph placed the small box on the table between them. "My son's name was Evan. He passed last year," he said. "Cancer. Complications from the burns. He never fully recovered." Lena swallowed but didn't speak. "But he lived 3 more years than any doctor predicted," Joseph continued. "And in those 3 years, he told that story more times than I can count. About the woman who wouldn't leave him, who covered him with her coat, who sang to him when the pain got too much." Owen glanced at Lena. She was pale, unmoving. "He never forgot your voice," Joseph said. "And when he got worse, he told me, 'Dad, if you ever find her, tell her thank you for letting me feel safe, even when I knew I wasn't going to make it.'" Lena pressed a hand to her mouth. "I wasn't sure you were real," Joseph said. "But I saw your face once, on a local news segment, off-duty rescue. They never said your name, but I recognized the eyes. So I looked. For months." He pushed the box gently toward her. "He wanted you to have this." Lena stared at the box. Her fingers hovered above it, trembling. Then she opened it. Inside was a small handmade medallion, a firefighter's emblem carved from the charred handle of Evan's old axe. Burned, but still solid. On the back, etched by hand, were the words, "You stayed." So I wasn't alone. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She reached up and wiped her cheek, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think anyone knew. We knew," Joseph said. "Some people see courage in medals. My son saw it in your silence." After he left, Lena stood at the window holding the medallion like it was made of glass. Owen came up beside her. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think I am." "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," he said. "I know." She looked at him, eyes shining. "But I did. For so long. I started to believe maybe none of it had mattered, that all I'd done was disappear." He shook his head. "You stayed. That's what matters." She turned toward him. "I never told you the whole truth," she said. "About that fire. About why I stayed. I was supposed to pull out. Orders were clear. But I heard him crying in the basement. And I thought, if I go and he dies, and no one ever knows I was there, would it still count?" Owen reached for her hand. "It counts." Lena blinked back tears. "Do you believe people like me deserve peace?" Owen held her gaze. "I believe people like you are peace for the rest of us." That night, after the boys were asleep and the dishes cleaned, Lena sat on the porch holding the medallion. Rain tapped lightly on the railing, gentle and rhythmic, like breath. She looked at Owen. "You know what I realized tonight?" "What's that?" "That sometimes the knock at the door isn't the past coming to haunt you. It's the world reminding you that you mattered, that you still do." Owen reached over, brushing his thumb gently over her hand. "And sometimes," he said, "it's someone reminding you that you're allowed to come in from the rain." The following morning, the world smelled like ash and apples. Lena stood alone in the barn, sunlight pooling through the slats in warm gold patches. The medallion rested in her palm, worn heavy for its size, but solid. It had survived the fire. So had she. And like her, it carried scorch marks that told a story few could read, but no one could deny. She closed her fingers around it. Behind her, the barn door creaked open. Owen's footsteps were soft, deliberate. He carried 2 mugs of coffee and the quiet kind of look only people who've spent time grieving without words can wear. "I figured you'd be up early," he said, handing her a cup. "I haven't really slept yet." "Want to talk?" She hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the bench in the center of the barn, surrounded by the quiet echoes of yesterday's children, of laughter, paint, and hammers. The space still smelled like cedar and progress. Lena rested the medallion on her knee. "I used to believe that if you were brave enough, everything would make sense," she said. "That if you made the hard choices, kept your head down, did the right thing, it would all work out." Owen said nothing. He let her speak. "But it doesn't," she continued. "You make your choices, and sometimes you still lose the people you love. Sometimes the world doesn't give you a reason, just a consequence." Owen stirred his coffee. "That's true. But maybe the point was never to make sense of it." She turned toward him. "Maybe," he added, "it's just to live through it, to keep showing up, especially when it's hard." Lena gave a soft laugh. "You always say the right thing." "No," he said. "I just know what it feels like to stand in the middle of the ashes and have nothing but questions." She met his eyes. "What brought you through?" He looked out the barn door toward the dogwood tree. "One morning I heard Charlie singing in the kitchen. Just one line from some old song, off-key, half asleep. And it hit me that sound didn't belong in a house full of grief. It didn't belong to the pain. It was life. Loud. Undeniable." He paused. "That's when I knew I had to choose. I could either stay locked in the fire that took everything, or I could step outside and teach my son how to live again." Lena nodded, eyes glistening. "You make it sound simple." It wasn't. Still isn't. But it's worth it. She looked down at the medallion again. "Caleb used to say that fire reveals things," she murmured. "Not just what burns, but what remains. What remains of you, Lena." She exhaled long and slow. "I don't know yet, but I'm not afraid to find out anymore." That afternoon, they took the boys to the edge of the creek just beyond the pasture. The rain had filled it high, and the current moved quickly, but the sun glinted off its surface like scattered coins. Lena brought the medallion with her. "What's that?" Charlie asked, pointing. "It belonged to someone who reminded me I did something good," she said. Emmett tugged her sleeve. "Are you giving it back?" She knelt between the boys, holding the medallion out in her palm. "No," she said. "But I think it's time to let it go." The boys looked confused, but Owen understood. Together they watched as Lena stepped to the water's edge, bent down, and placed the medallion on a flat rock. She whispered something no one else could hear. Then, with a breath, she gave the river her weight. The medallion slid into the current and disappeared beneath the rush of moving water. Emmett reached for her hand. Lena gripped it tightly. "I'll never forget," she said, "but I don't need to carry it anymore." That evening, Owen found her in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, sleeves rolled up apron-stained from a baking attempt gone joyfully wrong. "You're smiling," he said. "I'm baking," she replied, mock proud. "Is it edible?" "Not even remotely." He grinned. "Perfect." She looked up, flour smudged on her cheek, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw her as she might have been years ago. Young, bright-eyed, full of fire and fight. But he also saw something she'd earned along the way, grace. "Tell me something," she said, turning serious. "If I told you I'm thinking about staying for good, what would you say?" He stepped closer, met her eyes. "I'd say stay as long as it takes to know this is home. Then stay a little longer." She nodded slowly. I want to belong somewhere again, Owen. Not because I'm hiding, but because I'm choosing to be seen." "You're already seen," he said. "Right here." That night, the porch light glowed softly across the steps. The boys were asleep, tired from a day of creak stomping and chocolate chip chaos. Owen and Lena sat side by side on the swing, no need for words. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in years, Lena Monroe felt whole, not because she had erased her pain, but because she had lived through it and still had more love to give. Still light. Still fire. The firehouse had stood abandoned for nearly 4 years. Its roof sagged slightly toward the west, and the doors bore the charred ghosts of a fire that had taken more than wood and iron. It had taken pride, purpose, and a man Lena once loved more than the air in her lungs. But on that quiet morning, under a sky split between sunlight and low clouds, Lena stood before its doors. Once again, this time, not as a widow, not as a ghost, and not as someone passing through. She stood there as a woman returning not to mourn, but to rebuild. Owen pulled up beside her in the truck, Charlie and Emmett in the back seat, each holding a can of paint and more energy than any reasonable person should allow near a construction site. "You sure about this?" he asked as he stepped out. Lena gave a half smile. "No, but I'm here anyway. That's all the certainty I need." It took 2 weeks. They cleaned out broken equipment, scrubbed soot from the walls, and patched holes in the floorboards. Owen repaired the plumbing, while Lena spent hours restoring the old lockers, polishing the nameplates until her fingers cramped. The town noticed. First it was Mrs. Donnelly from the diner who dropped off sandwiches. Then came Carl and Nate, retired volunteers, who once ran drills in that very building. Before long, neighbors started stopping by just to ask you bringing it back. And Lena would answer softly but steadily. "We are." It wasn't going to be an operational fire station again. That part of its life had passed. But it would become something else. Something maybe more important. A place to teach. A place to remember. A place where fear could be turned into skill. Where kids could learn to hold a fire extinguisher, not just fear the flame. Where widows could sit in folding chairs and know their husbands had not died forgotten. On the 3rd Saturday, Lena stood in front of a room full of folding chairs, half filled with curious neighbors. Single mothers, tired dads, 2 elderly veterans, and 7 children who couldn't sit still if their lives depended on it. Behind her, a chalkboard read CPR and first response. Training. Free. All welcome. She wore her old fire department t-shirt, not a badge, not a title, just the memory of who she'd once been, and the quiet confidence of who she'd become. Owen watched from the back, arms folded, heart full. She began with her voice steady. "Some of you know who I was, some of you don't. That's okay. I'm not here to talk about credentials or departments. I'm here because once upon a time someone stayed with my son when I couldn't. And I promised myself that one day I'd be that someone for someone else." She looked at the kids, then the parents. "So today we're going to talk about what to do when something goes wrong, so you don't freeze, so you don't panic, so you don't have to say, 'I wish I had known.'" A quiet settled over the room. And then she began. After the session, a woman approached Lena, a mother holding a young girl with burn scars along one arm. "I was afraid to come," the woman said. I thought seeing the uniforms again would make her relive it." Lena knelt so she was eye level with the little girl. "Did it scare you?" The child shook her head. "No. You talked like a mom, not like a boss." Lena smiled, her throat tight. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." The mother touched Lena's shoulder. "Thank you for making this place feel safe again." Outside, the sun had broken through completely. Emmett and Charlie raced between the firehouse and the barn, arguing about who got to ring the salvaged bell Owen had mounted on a post near the front. It had once signaled alarm. Now, it marked celebration. Lena stepped out and took a long look at the building. The walls were still worn. The trim needed another coat. But it was alive again. Not because it was perfect, but because people believed in it. Because she believed in it. Owen walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. Dust streaked across his cheek. "You gave this town something they didn't even know they missed," he said. "I gave myself something I thought I'd lost." He nodded, slowly searching her face. "How are you really doing?" Lena hesitated. Then, lighter. Still tired. Still figuring it out. But staying. She looked at him. Yes. Not running this time. Not even looking over my shoulder. Owen took a breath, stepped a little closer. "I've wanted to say something for a while," he said. Lena tilted her head. "Then say it. You changed the way this house breathes, the way I breathe." She didn't flinch, didn't laugh it off. Instead, she reached up and brushed a streak of dust from his jaw. Her hand lingered a second longer than necessary. "I was so afraid I'd forgotten how to feel this," she whispered. And I haven't. That night, the firehouse stayed lit late. Inside, the glow of lanterns danced across the restored walls, and outside, laughter echoed under the stars. Lena sat on the steps with Owen. The boys were asleep inside, curled in sleeping bags like explorers guarding a treasure. "You know what I love about this place?" she asked. "What's that?" It didn't need to be new to be good again. He looked at her, warmth in his voice. "Neither did you." She smiled and leaned against him. And as the night deepened, the firehouse stood, not as a ruin resurrected, but as proof that what once carried pain could now hold peace. The rain came back on a Sunday. Not a storm, just a gentle drizzle, like the sky had decided to breathe for the first time in weeks. It fell soft against the roof of the firehouse and whispered through the trees like an old song remembered. Inside the barn, the children napped on a pile of cushions worn out from laughter and pancakes. The world was still. Lena stood by the porch, railing a blanket draped over her shoulders. She sipped coffee from the mug Owen always insisted was the good one, the chipped navy ceramic that somehow made everything taste warmer. Behind her, Owen stepped onto the porch, barefoot, carrying his guitar. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her, tuned a string or two, and began to play a quiet melody that sounded like the wind brushing the wheat fields just before dusk. Lena didn't speak for a while. Then softly she said, "I used to think healing meant forgetting." Owen paused his strumming. "But it doesn't," she continued. "It just means learning how to carry things without letting them drown you." He nodded, and knowing when to put them down. She looked over at him. "I never thought I'd find someone who'd let me carry it at my own pace." He didn't flinch. "You never needed anyone's permission. But I'm glad I was here when you were ready." That evening the knock came again. Only this time, it wasn't fate waiting on the other side. It was Mrs. Donnelly from the diner, soaked from the knees down and holding a large envelope wrapped in plastic. "Figured I'd better deliver this myself," she said, smiling. Didn't want the rain to ruin it. She handed it to Lena, then nodded toward Owen. "You two make this town feel alive again." Before they could respond, she turned and headed back to her truck windshield wipers, already squeaking against the light mist. Lena opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter, formal, stamped with the county seal. And beneath it, 2 folded pages, typed on clean official stationery. Lena scanned the contents, eyes widening. It's a grant, she breathed, from the State Emergency Fund. They reviewed the firehouse plan, and they're approving support equipment, training supplies, even a small staff stipend. Owen leaned over to read, then let out a low whistle. This is real. She nodded. It's going to happen. Officially. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the paper, but her voice was steady. For so long, I didn't know what any of it had meant. Caleb's death. The fire. The way I couldn't breathe every time someone said the word hero. But now, it's not about erasing him. Or the pain. It's about building something that lasts. Something that saves lives in a different way. Owen put a hand on her back. It already has. The weeks that followed bloomed with momentum. The firehouse launched its first full community safety program. Lena trained 2 volunteers to help lead CPR sessions. Owen held weekend classes for single dads on basic home safety. The town's children began treating the barn like a second home. Some arrived early just to sit on the porch swing and ask Lena about the different fire codes and how to save someone the right way. The walls of the old firehouse were still scarred, but Lena refused to repaint them. They were living proof, testimony, just like her. One day, as she helped Emmett build a model fire truck out of cardboard and glue, Charlie sat down beside her with a serious face. "Aunt Lena, you're the bravest person I know." She looked at him touched. "Why's that?" "Because you were on fire," he said, pointing to his heart, "and you still didn't burn up." She blinked. "And you stayed." On a cool April morning, Owen took her hand in front of the same creek where she'd once let go of Evan's medallion. They stood under the tree that had watched over so much grief, so much healing. "I'm not asking for promises," he said. "And I'm not asking for anything perfect." Lena tilted her head, curious. "I'm asking if you'll build the rest of it with me," he finished. "The firehouse, the barn, the quiet dinners, the storms, all of it." She looked down at their fingers, then back up into his eyes. "I thought I had to keep running to be strong," she said. "But I was wrong. Strength is staying when it matters most." He smiled. "So is that a yes?" She smiled back. "That's a, when do we start?" Later that summer, a sign went up on the front of the firehouse. The Monroe Center for Community Safety and Resilience below it, in smaller letters, in honor of all who stayed. Lena stood beneath the sign with Owen and the boys, arms linked to the sun, breaking through the clouds like a quiet benediction. A woman who had lost nearly everything. A man who had once believed he was too broken to be loved again. 2 boys who had lived through silence and grown into joy. And a firehouse old and imperfect made holy, not by what it had survived, but by the love it now held. That night, it rained again. But no one ran for cover, because some storms they'd learned didn't come to destroy. Some came to water the seeds of second chances. And under that soft rain, on a porch filled with laughter and light, Lena and Owen sat, hand in hand, listening not to thunder, but to the beautiful fragile sound of peace taking root. "We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from your stories, your cities, your quiet corners of the world? They matter to us. Drop a comment below, and let's build a space of kindness and connection together. If this story moved you, even just a little, consider subscribing to the channel. We share true-to-the-heart stories like this every week, stories that remind us that love, grace, and second chances are never out of reach. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Whether you're watching alone with a cup of tea or with someone you love beside you, we're so grateful you're here. Until next time, stay kind. And never underestimate what one small act of compassion can do.